guess that kind of brings us up to speed for this, or up to present day, with where JP's at right now. Been a pretty good chunk of time. So that's probably about good for tonight. And obviously, thanks for coming on the podcast. I mean, one of the best things for me about this podcast is that there's heroes like you that people don't know about. And there's heroes from the past that people don't know about. And being able to bring heroes like yourself and heroes from the past to the present time and let people know and introduce that there's warriors in the past you need to know about, and there's warriors walking with us today that you need to know about. And that's one of my favorite things about the podcast, is having the opportunity to do that. And if you like listening to this podcast, well, guess what? I believe Echo Charles can tell you how to support the podcast.
I have a question.
Oh, man. Here we go. Hot seat.
Why are you going to flank me like that?
I remember, actually, the day I met you a long time ago, before I actually knew you real good.
Mm-hmm. You know me real good now? Is that the deal?
I think so.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. But like you always, and actually listening to you now, like I kind of realized like you live in the moment a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
Like I remember we were sitting at this when we had sushi that night.
Yeah.
The first night I met you. Like when was that? Like 2007 or something.
2007.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember you, and you had another guy with you. I forget.
Yeah, my buddy, Kurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember we're all talking, but everyone's talking, and I hear you kind of on the side. You're like this is good, man. Eating sushi with good people. We're doing so. Kind of like you're totally. It's like you're explaining to him, but you're explaining to yourself. Like what am I experiencing right now?
Yeah.
And how good is this? How cool is this?
Yeah.
Almost like you had this stuff coming up, and you're living in that moment.
Yeah,
Right there.
absolutely.
Just like with the stories with like you mentioned, like you saw the ambient light coming down. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Why is that? Do you think? Or is there a specific reason? Do you think? Because a lot of people not like that. You know how like they'll be like, "Oh, we're about to do this. I'm excited," or that thing happened and that's whack or whatever.
Yeah.
And they don't really, you know what I mean?
I've always been like that. My parents taught us just to enjoy what you have. It doesn't have to be material stuff. Just enjoy the life that you have. And I've also always realized that people have it a lot worse. And then after 2 deployments, because I met you after my second deployment, like I'd seen the worst. I'd seen evil firsthand. I'd seen actual oppression, not what some of these idiots are talking about right now.
Yeah.
I'd seen, kids with underwear on and sandals in the streets, and that's all they had. I've seen, women holding their kids crying. I've seen guys use kids as human shields because they're cowards. And I'm getting to sit and enjoy sushi in San Diego, California with my best friend, Curtis, from high school, and a new group of guys that I met, through other team guys. And I'm like, man, life is good.
We were with the Cake Nuts, by the way.
Oh, Cake Nuts makes another appearance on the Jocko Podcast.
Yeah. Solid dude. I think he tried to rip a tree out of the ground once, right?
Probably.
No, he did. Someone convinced him that he couldn't pull a tree out of the ground, so he tried.
Yeah, Jeremy probably tried to convince him that.
I think you're right on that.
Yeah. Fully. Also, second thing, what did they find out why you weren't producing testosterone?
Just the pituitary gland. The sac around my pituitary gland was damaged and destroyed pretty bad.
From the blast or something, or
from that blast and just multiple other like explosions and blasts overseas. I mean, we use breaching charge to open up doors. Where you're in a gunfight and the machine gun is legitimately going off right next to your head. That's providing like cushion. That there's times after gunfights, like I felt like I was just drunk.
Yeah,
I felt like I was drunk just because I was just out of it, and so just that much, and then just combat sports and other stuff like that, and so. When Amanda finally got me to go to the VA to get my levels tested, a normal male, we're supposed to be between 600 to 900. I was 81. Yeah, it was bad. And they were just like, how? Like they called. I didn't answer my phone because I was at work. and I was on the other line or something like that, and they called Amanda. They're like, he needs to come back in right away. So of course they freak my wife out, right? She thinks I'm dying or something like that. Like, and then so I go and they get it retested again. It was 87. And they're like, "Are you on steroids right now?" And I'm like, "Look at me. Do I look like I'm on steroids?" Now, granted, like when I was younger, I'd taken some real strong supplements from like Max Muscle and different places like that had them available, and I'm sure that might have had an effect. But I don't know.
No.
You know what I mean? I know. Well, like I try to like get own up to some of the mistakes. Because Jocko used to joke. He's like, JP just wants to be 205 pounds walking around.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Well, now I wish I could get down to 205. But so yeah, my levels were really messed up, and they're like, "How do you even get out of bed? How do you do this and this?" I'm like, well, I have a family I have to provide for. I really don't have another option, so just got to get out there and get after it.
We call that BTF.
Just BTFing throughout the day.
Yeah, that's crazy. And that's another part. Remember how we talk about where that's the part that you don't really hear that much about. Just those little details. Like you say in a gunfight, if the machine gun is right here and it hits you. Yeah. Kind of like someone's hitting you physically,
It's a shock to your system.
Yeah. I mean, and I've been, I was actually going through some videos, and I'll try to get you guys some of these the other day, where I'm laying down on the sniper rifle and we're in a big firefight, and they come and straddle over me to start firing off rockets, and I'm getting that blast coming down, just crushing me. Damn. And then Mikey, right next to me with the AW gun, he's like, ah, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna like need coloring crayons for Christmas next year or something. Like,
yeah, man.
By the way, when you fire a rocket in training, you put on 2 levels of ear protection.
I had none.
Yeah,
you don't need ear pro in combat. Your ears naturally squeeze. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I remember one of my friends who went through sniper school too. He'd talk about the I think it was like the 50 cal.
Yeah.
50 cal.
Yeah.
He's like, bro, the thing is like just shooting it is like you're getting punched in the face.
Oh, it is.
Just shooting it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, considering we mount those to the tops of Hummers.
Yeah.
And if you don't have your foot on the brake and it's in park, it'll move the vehicle. And even that, and you see a vehicle going just moving, like, and I was also a lead driver. So there's times where the machine, like 50 cal is right over us in the front, like the barrel's like sticking out, and you're getting that blast, and you're like, oh, I mean, it's just, but it's part of it. You know what I mean? Like, I would not change any of that.
Yeah, it's
for
crazy
anything.
how like those details, like to someone who hasn't been, that's kind of a big deal. Because you watch movies and the guy's shooting and the guy's reaching across the guy, shooting the guy in the street corner and all this stuff. And then if you know those details, you're like, whoa, you skipped over this whole big kind of element of this situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just, so much respect, the guys that are still on the teams. I just did under 12 years in the Navy. I didn't do my full time. And you look at these guys that do 20, 22, 25 years. Like, I'm just like, dude, hats off to those guys, and like the guys that are still the same guys that I deployed with, it's weird me talking about it like I did anything special. Like, as a team, we did something special.
Yeah.
And those guys are still in the fight. They're still deploying. They're still doing workups. They're battling divorces. They're, dealing with new babies being born and, taking care of their wives and, family. And it's just like, just so much respect to those guys. And you look at all the other branches that we served with. And those guys just, dude, 18-month deployments.
18-month deployments.
Oh,
15-month deployments.
You get to go home for 2 weeks halfway through.
Yep.
Guys are going home to, like, their families moved out.
Yeah, destroyed.
Like, gone. Like, have
not
no
all
idea.
time, but.
I mean,
it happens.
You hear that. A couple guys came home. They came back from on leave, and I was like, hey, how was it? He's like, well, my wife and kids are gone. I don't know where any of my stuff is. And I'm like,
so jacked up.
Do you want a hug? I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, JP and I were talking about that earlier, like, we're visible. Well, I'm definitely visible. Mm-hmm. And I was telling JP, like, you will now be visible, more visible. I mean, he's been maintained a pretty low profile. And,
tried to.
Yeah, because of your fighting has a little bit of profile, but, you're going to be more visible. And when you get visible, people automatically think that you're special in some way. Mm-hmm. And like, I'm telling you, there's nothing special here. No. Definitely not from me, because, like I did 20 years in the Navy, but okay, great. There's guys that do 30 years. There's guys that do 14 different deployments. There's guys that, get wounded. And then you, like JP just said, you branch that out to all the services. And, I'm another guy. And we're just other guys where we have a little bit of a higher profile, but that's not due to our, anything special that we did. Just the way things shook out in the end. So I always want to make that clear.
And like law enforcement, they're doing it every day. Like
Every
my
day.
uncle that I was telling you about, every day. Now we do a workup and then we just go get after it for 6 months and come home, do a workup, go get after it. But he's like legitimately getting after it every day for 15 plus years. And you're like,
it's a 23-year deployment.
Yeah.
To a combat zone.
Yeah. With limited resources, limited support, and
limited training.
Limited training and a hostile environment
on both the criminal side and actually oftentimes on the civil side of people that are, lashing out at police officers from that whole other angle now. So
it's unfortunate.